Hello, today we are welcoming to Elephant Fest the great author Meg Wolitzer, which is one of my favorite authors. It's an honor for me to welcome you today. We at Trei Publishing House published your works with the Belzhar, the great young fiction that gained a great readership among our youngsters. And my first question is, how did you write this novel that connects you so much with Sylvia Plath?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here, even from afar. I wanted to connect very much with my younger self, my teenage self, when I was writing Belzhar. And one of the things that I thought about when I thought about myself as a teenager was reading the book The Belzhar by Sylvia Plath, her only novel, for the first time. And I was on a train and my very literary friend had recommended it to me. And I read it and I thought, wow, this is so much about pain and suffering. And I didn't experience that kind of pain and suffering. But, you know, we've all had pains of our own, not necessarily emotional problems to the extent that that author did. But I realized that it was possible through writing to really express the most profound feelings, sometimes ones that you might not want to talk about openly, that you might feel afraid to talk about. You need someone you trust. Or some people can talk about it openly, but writing is a way to talk about what you care about most. And Plath was someone who did that. And I read it when I was 14, and I've never forgotten that feeling.
Yeah, you studied at the same college at Smith.
Yes. I started there and I left there and transferred to Brown. But those 2 years at Smith, Plath's presence was sort of in the air because she had written a lot about being a student at Smith, her journals. I mean, it was an era, the 1950s, when she wrote, first of all, letters home to her mother like every day, which I did not do, I'm sorry to say, and endless journal writing. And they're all in the library at Smith, like big books of, you know, diaries. So it's all there and you really know what her life was like.
Great. Tell me, before you wrote the Belzhar, you were an adult fiction writer.
Yes.
How was it for you to switch to the young fiction writing? Was it difficult? Was it, I don't know, did you change anything in your writing style?
You know, it wasn't as hard as you might think, because I kind of feel that we all keep our younger selves inside of us. It's like those Russian nesting dolls, the matryoshka dolls. There's like a younger self and then a younger self, you know, all sort of in me. And we remember things, like we remember the first something that happened. And I think writing for young people is often about writing about the first time I realized X, the first time I did Y. So that was inside me, but it's a good question about what is different. I think that some of my adult writing, I'll let myself kind of go off on tangents. I'll let myself have like interior stuff for a long period of time in a way that, at least with the book Belzhar, because it was in first person and it was the story of this young woman who can't get over the tragic loss of her boyfriend. So she's been sent to a school for gifted but troubled teenagers. She needs to tell her story. She needs to get it out. I think sometimes I'll take a little more leisurely time when I'm writing in third person for adults. So maybe it's about how much time it takes to get there.
Yeah, maybe. The second novel we published from your works was The Interesancies. Mm-hmm. It's a great Bildungsroman, and I was mesmerized by the universe you created. So many characters, so many life situations, so much pain, so much love, so many insecurities. It must have been so complicated for you to aggregate so much ingredients?
That was a complicated book to write, just structurally. Yeah, I had to, I don't like making outlines, but I really did after a certain point have to kind of like write, okay, it's 1974, it's 1989.
Yeah.
Because the novel takes place over like 40 years and it follows from a group of teenagers who meet when they're young and then it follows through their adult lives. I'm not good with numbers. I'm really not, and everybody in that book is exactly my age, so it made it a lot easier. Usually I can't do that. Like with my book, The Wife, you know, it starts also actually at Smith College in the 1950s. I don't know, was the film of The Wife, did it come out in Romania? The Glen.
No, but we've seen it.
Okay, okay. So they, in the Interestings, they were my age. But it was complicated, yeah, because it's not a linear narrative. You know, it jumps in time. It's really about quite a bit, yeah.
Now I have a question about your mother, because you, we just earlier you just mentioned her name. I know she became a novelist at 44.
Yes.
During the women's movements in the 70s. Was she your inspiration to become a writer?
Yes, definitely. You know, because she showed me you could do it. You could do it. And I actually had an experience that I put into my novel, The Interestings. I was giving a reading or a lecture somewhere, and afterward there was a question and answer period, and a woman stood up and said, "My daughter wants to be a playwright, but I know how hard it is for anyone to make it in that world, particularly a woman, but anyone. What should I tell her?" And I said, "Well, is she talented?" And she said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Is she dying to do it?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I think you should tell her that's wonderful, because the world will whittle your daughter down, but a mother never should." And my mother never did. And I think that's really, in a big way, why I've been able to live and work as a writer. I'm very, very grateful to her. She had not been to college. She had not had a formal education. Her parents didn't think it was important for her to have that. And she basically taught herself quite a bit. She's an enormous reader. She's one of the most brilliant people I know. And I would show her stories, you know, as a child, terrible things, horrible stories that I wrote. I would bring them into her, and she was encouraging or critical, depending, and I got so much from that. So yes, a real role model.
Did you put some bits from your mother's life or personality into The Wife?
You know, the only thing I would say really that I put into The Wife was thinking about something that happened to her when her first novel came out, because she was a housewife.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly had a novel out. One of the reviews said, "Housewife turns into novelist." And she joked that it was as if she was Clark Kent going into a phone booth and becoming Superman. Like, what? A housewife? How could that be? As if people, you know, as if people don't have stories and lives that they could write about and do something with. And I felt that it was somewhat condescending, and I think she thought that too. So yes, I mean, it's a made-up story. I invent all my novels. They are never from my life in any real way, except maybe a catalyst, like in The Interestings. I did go to a summer camp like that camp, but nothing that happened in my life. So yeah, watching that, I definitely think that inspired or triggered something, sure.
Yeah. Tell me, please, what did you felt when you first saw the Wife movie? And then close in the
you know, if I were sitting across the room, I have a signed poster from all the actors of The Wife. I'm staring at it right now, but you can't see it. You'll just have to trust me. I felt really impressed by the way that in the novel, it's so much about the character's voice. Well, it's funny because I was talking about writing in first person before with regard to Belzhar versus The Interestings, or even the female Persuasion. And there's an immediacy. When you write in first person, you have to get it out. Like the character has something to say, or otherwise, why would you give this person the platform to do it in first person unless they had a specific way of saying it? So Joan, the narrator of the wife, the heroine and the eponymous narrator of the wife, she's angry and she's funny.
Yeah.
In the movie, which was directed by a Swedish director, Björn Runge, and it's very beautifully shot, looks like a Swedish film, which it is, partly. It's so much about Glenn's face. It's about what she doesn't say as much as it is about what she does. And that was really kind of amazing to me, because I realized that in translation, I guess I think the best translations of, and I don't mean a translation of a book as in a different language, but from forms, the best ones, in my experience, take something and run with it. It's not that they're just faithful. I think that can be a little dull. But she made it a new thing. She made it like, what is inside this woman? You need to find out. And it's going to break out. Whereas in the book, on page 1, she's just like, she says in the book, I'm leaving my husband. And that doesn't happen in the movie. So I really thought she did a brilliant job. I think she's incredible.
Yeah. Before this interview, I tried to remember the movie, and I realized that I remembered the most her silence. Her face.
She's silent,
Yes.
held in. And it's funny because tonally, the book is very, very different. She's not held in at all. She's letting it rip. And Glenn and I really talked about that. We did some interviews. We did a New York Times talk. I think it's online.
I think.
Yeah, about that. And I really am so interested in the different ways that actors work from the way writers work. Because I think we both work from character. I know that I do. I'm very, very interested in character. Somebody said what we remember of the books we love isn't plot, but character. And I don't know that you can make a blanket statement, but for me, that's very, very true. The books I love, when I think about it, I don't think, oh, that scene where the car chased the other car. I think about what someone said to someone else and how their face fell or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Now, questions about the Female Persuasion, a book that just came out in Romania. And it's a very powerful book about feminism, about relationship between women, between a mentor and the mentoree. And when the book came out in United States, the New Yorker said the novel's plot is set in motion by a Me Too moment avant la lettre. Do you think that the feminism is more important and widespread today than it was in the 2000s, maybe 20 years ago?
Yeah, I was talking to friends who are like big feminist lecturers, and they would go to college campuses, and depending on the year and depending on the campus, they felt, I can't get anywhere. Like it was just kind of nowhere. Like it was like, why is this relevant to my life? Some women said. And I think that in the past few years, we've seen the subject of feminism become front and center in the news in a way that we hadn't seen for a really, really long time. I'm somebody who's watched the whole trajectory. Like, as with the interesting, I'm always interested in the big story. So my mother was really affected by the women's movement. She became a writer in large part, I think, because of the women's movement, the encouragement of other women. And then for a long time, you could still sort of say something demeaning about women and you would get a laugh. And, and of course you still can. Obviously here in the US with Trump as president, where he's demeaned women frequently, that in a way has sparked a lot of women talking about respect for women and safety for women and all of that. So I think the political is inextricable from how we see social justice movements generally. So sure.
Yeah, in Romania it's quite the same, but on a smaller scale. There are more and more talks about feminism and women's rights, and I think this is great for us and for women expression.
Yes, it is. Wherever it is in the world, I feel that the conversation, the thing about talking, the thing about dialogue, is that you don't know where it will lead. You don't know, but you can't have it if you don't talk about it. So I think that cultures and countries that can do that and take it on and make it more widespread and more common, and not just this thing that's only interesting to people if they consider themselves, say, political. It's so much about the fabric of our lives. I mean, here in the US, back in the day of, when I saw feminism really sort of affecting my mother, one of the big issues was childcare. And to this day in the US, most women don't have cheap, good access to childcare. This is something that has not been solved. And it's not just, oh, that would make life easier. Just think of what it might accomplish even beyond that. We don't know. So that's not necessarily for people who consider themselves political. But I feel that it's all interconnected. Ideas around what kind of a decent life do you have? Do you have the right to be free from violence, be free from sexual violence, be free to have your child placed with someone who can take care of him or her while you work and see the work that you need to help support your family? So all of it is connected, and I think people really started to feel that way. They did back in the women's movement, and then for a while, in a lot of places, it kind of went down. But for some people, it never did. But now it's very much. It hasn't gone away from the news here, not at all.
Yeah, I hope
there's been a backlash.
Yeah, I hope to follow the same path in Romania because it's very important.
Yes.
8 years ago, you wrote an article for the New York Times, The Second Shelf. And you wrote there, women who write literary fiction frequently find themselves in an unjust world because it's dominated by men writers, and from the manuscript selection to the book design to the marketing, seems to be a world of men, the publishing world. Is it better now? It's a more just world now, or not so much?
I think it's a mixed picture. I think things have gotten better in certain areas without a doubt, but in other areas it remains kind of depressing. I don't think that there's one way to look at it. It depends on how you see it. Toni Morrison and Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize for Literature. We've seen great women writers win prizes, but you have to really look at it over a long period of time. There are ways, one of the things that what you referred to about the book jackets is the ways in which books by men have often had like a big, bold typeface and very little illustration that say to the reader, this book is an event. And books by women have often had what I jokingly call little girl in a field of wheat or women in water, and you can't really imagine two men standing on like a train platform. Hey, Bill, what's that you're reading? Little Girl in a Field of Wheat. They might, oh yeah, I loved it. I loved Little Girl in a Field of Oats, the sequel. That's not going to happen because books are designed by publishers for whom they think the readers will be. You can't fault publishers fully because the truth is, I believe there have been studies and women are the biggest readers of fiction. But when it comes to books getting serious attention, getting serious reviews, the cover says a lot, winning prizes, as it goes from hand to hand to a reviewer, to a prize committee, whatever, what do we think of as important? And we code things. Oh, that's just for women. Not everybody sees it this way, because I have a friend that's very, very good, wonderful writer who said, I don't care if people consider my work women's fiction. Most of the characters are women. Most of my readers who I hear from are women. Call it what you want. It doesn't take away from what it is. For me, I feel that every book should have the same chance, to be taken as seriously as the book deserves. And if the book is disguised to look like something it's not, if it's a serious meditation on the loss of a mother, but it's just, has that little girl in a field of wheat, and we might think, oh, that's sweet. And then somebody who's interested in reading a serious meditation on the loss of a mother might not pick it up, or might not even think that that's a serious topic because it's about women. I mean, the thing is, we have seen examples that are very heartening, but I think that there is a baked in, we look toward the male voice, culturally look toward the male voice again and again, and not just that, but I think a male perspective. Somebody else did a very small study, I don't know if we can call it a study, looking at the numbers of books that had won big literary prizes that were from the point of view of a woman. Because you could have a book like Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, you'd have a book by a woman, powerful, world-respected books that are from male perspectives. What about, do we want to understand how women live, what women's lives are like too? And I think that, we know that people who read fiction have a greater capacity for empathy. There have been scientific data to back that up. So I always feel, don't you want to know what it's like for someone else? Especially now when we see how we're all connected but apart. The notion of learning, what is it like for you in your life? I want to know. Fiction helps do that.
Yeah. Do you think this pandemic will change the publishing market from trends to buying habits to readership?
I'm sure it will. I don't know enough about how it will. A friend in children's publishing said that some parents were buying their favorite books that they read when they were young for their children, because their children were basically, I don't know what it's like there, but our schools closed. Our schools closed, right?
Here's too, yeah.
So children are, doing Zoom for some of the day, but they can't do it all day. And parents are buying books that they loved. And even if they're not in the curriculum for their children, somebody said that they were seeing sales of beloved books that were important to the mothers and fathers when they were young. As for adult reading, I don't know. A friend of mine, Emma Straub, had a book that just came out, All Adults Here, and I think it had it got a lot of attention, and I think it hit the New York Times bestseller list, and that was very heartening. But I think we're all in a struggle to figure out how to spend our day. How much time are you going to read? How much time are you going to cook? How much time are you going to worry? How much time are you going to go out? And for me, books are vital to life, whether we're in lockdown or whether we're able to go around anywhere we want to go. I always have a book with me. I'm sitting in front of a wall of books. I don't know how it will be for publishers. I hope it will be okay. I mean, I think it, again, like with women, there's probably not one answer.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard because bookstores will struggle. That's a really serious problem, and we need to help. We need to help independent bookstores as much as we can.
Yeah, you're right. You said you write all the time. You read all the time. What do you read now?
Well, I want to. I've been wanting to find the perfect book for me right now, and I'm open to any recommendations. A Romanian novel in translation would be great. I'm going back. It's funny because I said that thing about parents picking classics for their children. I really wanted to read Willa Cather again. I want to read Middlemarch. I wanted to read my friend Emma Straub's book, something new. So it's like something new and something old. Maybe in a way, unconsciously, it's a way of connecting to the pleasure of the reading experiences of the past. Because if you think of, if you feel disheartened, if you've had a loss in your life now, if you're afraid, if you're worried for the future, if you've lost your job and you're thinking, how can I have time for reading? Or how can I even concentrate on it? I guess I sort of feel maybe we can think about the reading that we did at a very different time and remember what it gave us, and have to have a little hope that there will be a future where we can feel that way again.
Yeah, I think we are trying to get back to the times when we were safe and we were loved and safe, and none of these were at horizon.
That's right. I mean, the thing about reading a book is that if it's good, if it works, it's so absorbing. It creates a world around you. And I think it's not that we need to escape. I want a book right now that tells me something about human life, but also reminds me of the power of art, the power of the word, how it's gotten us through a lot of things. People have written great books about wars. People will write and have written great books about pandemics. But even what about being with your family? That's important. It's the large and the small. Books give us that.
Yeah. At some point after the female Persuasion was launched in the US, Nicole Kidman announced she would co-produce the movie.
Yes.
For Amazon Studios. Do you have any news about that?
It seems to be moving along, and I'm very excited about that, and I hope that she will star in it. We'll see. But it's still very much alive, and I think it will make a great film because, again, like what I was saying about character, there's two great roles not only, but a young woman and older woman. It's very much about mentorship and the person you meet when you're young who sees something in you and changes the course of your life.
Yeah, I think it would be a great movie.
Oh, thanks.
Now, I must wish you a happy birthday because you'll have your birthday in 4 days.
That's right. Oh my gosh. I was thinking, what will I do for my birthday? Well, the options are very few.